was muted there for a second. Greetings. Salutations. Welcome in. Get started here. I don't know. It's like I forgot all of a sudden how to begin a live stream. I don't know what's going on with me, man. I don't know what's going on with me. I have too many video games, maybe. That said, welcome in, everybody. Right. We're live currently on Twix, YouTube, and Rumble. This is technically the February Whispering in the Dark because I got mixed up on my calendars. Should have been last week. It wasn't last week. So here we are. We're doing it now. And at the end of the month, we'll do the March one. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Hey, old Blindy. Good to see you. Let me know if you're in the comments. And this is essentially, we do a lot more chat interactions here than I do on a lot of the other shows on this channel and on other channels as well, I guess. I guess you could say that, but I'm not in charge on those channels, so it's fine. Hey, Jacob Gallo, good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, not a mirror late. No. I was only a little bit late. A couple seconds. It's fine. People have jobs, man. I know. So do I. That's why it was set for 10. I go home a little bit ago. So, yeah, daylight savings time is coming up. I actually don't know when that is. Soon, I think. Australia's already on it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Might be this weekend. I don't recall exactly. But it's gonna jack everything up, as it always does. Goddamn robber barons and their extra hour of daylight. Anyway, that's something that I think we need to do away with worldwide is daylight savings time. It's retarded. It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason for that to be a thing whatsoever. It's I mean, aside from like certain people, certain bankers make a lot more money that way, but for the rest of us, it just fucks up the day. For like 6 months, and then we have to do it again. It's retarded, and it needs to go away. And there are a few places that don't indulge in that nonsense. Arizona is one of them, but Arizona has other problems, so it is what it is, I guess. But no, where I live definitely does, though. And I'm not super keen on that. I'm not. That's a whole thing. So it is what it is. But we're not late today. Not really. Like, it was still within the first minute. So, it's fine. It's fine. It's not like Saturday where I just woke up, or like Fridays where we got to get a bunch of shit sorted before we start or anything. This basically is just press go live and go live, start talking, that kind of thing. So, howdy, Mr. Beak. Howdy. That is categorically untrue. There's still plenty of hours of darkness in which to get eaten. So, by vampires and various other things that go bump in the night. Ghouls, for instance. Well, ghouls aren't really a threat to the living if we think about it logically, because what ghouls do is they feast on the flesh of the dead, right? Now, in certain circumstances, I could see where they could make themselves some fresh dead to munch on, but most of the time, that's why they hang out in graveyards. They like eating corpses that have been fermenting for a while. So they're not really into the whole eating the living thing. It's not their bag. But vampires do eat the living. Zombies don't really eat anything unless they're directly instructed to by their master. That's a bit of a misnomer because they don't really do anything on their own. Ghosts, same thing. They don't really eat anything. Revenants also don't really eat anything, as long as we're talking types of undead here. Revenants only come back for a specific purpose, though. They're usually revenge driven. And once that revenge has been achieved, then they go back to the afterlife. The crow is a great example of what a revenant actually is. Because Eric Draven was undead, very undead, and when his mission was accomplished, he went back to death. But he wasn't like sucking the souls out of the living or anything like that. Vampires are more of a threat than humanity itself. I mean, They would be if they were in any real numbers. Like, did you ever see the movie Daybreakers, where basically vampires had taken over the whole world and they were running out of humans to eat? So they were trying to create a synthetic blood that would sustain them when humans basically went extinct, kind of thing. It was an interesting concept, But yeah, if they existed in any real numbers, it'd absolutely be a threat. But they don't, not really. So it's the whole thing. Voting is an act of revenance. No, voting is an act of lying. If you're talking about dead people who've been voting for years, kind of thing. That's straight up a lie. They're not actually voting. It's just somebody else voting and then saying they did, um, kind of thing. But yeah, no. Usually, it's a little more personal than that, right? It's a little bit more personal than that. Like, again, going back to the Crow, Eric Draven rises from the dead to avenge both his murder and the rape and murder of his fiance, right? This is a very personal story. I doubt somehow he would have gotten out of his grave for, like, you know, because fuck Trump. Right? I don't think that would have happened. I don't think he would have cared that much. It wasn't a personal thing. So, but yeah. There are myths and legends about various kinds of hell, even vampires. There are, I don't know, a couple dozen subspecies of those found all over the world in folklore. We mostly focus on the ones in Hollywood because they took a lot of their inspiration off of like more modern tellings, like Varney the Vampire comes to mind, and Lenore by Poe. But more specifically, Bram Stoker, what he did with Dracula, because he was essentially writing about something else entirely. He just kind of used the whole vampire thing to tell that story. Um, and he dressed him up. He dressed him up, made him pretty, made him charismatic, made him irresistible and hypnotic. And for those who don't know, the whole neck teeth thing, the way he wrote it was an allegory for rape. We're not even 10 minutes in. I've already said rape twice, 3 times now. Awesome. This is going to go well. So, but it was because you couldn't directly write about sexual violence in that era. Dracula was published in 1895 in England or Ireland. I mean, dude was Irish, but I think he was living in England at the time. And yeah, there were just some things you couldn't write about. You could get in serious trouble for writing about certain things. Oscar Wilde was not one of those people who got in trouble for what he wrote, so much as what he was doing in his personal life, which at the time was very fucking illegal too. But yeah, it was definitely one of those things. One of the reasons that we look at England and we're just like, yeah, you guys don't have free speech. You have a long ass leash, but you don't have free speech. And to this day, because none of those draconian laws have really changed much. It's just the application of them that has. So, but yeah, it was a different time. So you had to skirt around the issues that you were actually talking about with allegory. And allegory is often a poor substitute for things, but it is what it is. But yeah, he made the vampires pretty, right? Well, specifically Dracula, right? Which is really funny because if you actually read the novel, dude's sporting a porno stash the entire time, like looking cheesy as fuck with like a Eastern European long ass mullet, right? Like he looks like Vlad the Impaler the way he's described, right? It was only when Bela Lugosi was actually, I would say even further than that. I just found out the other day it was the 104th anniversary this year of the film Nosferatu, which was the first film adaptation of Dracula, but it was unlicensed, which is why all the names are changed and why the vampire itself looks more like a humanoid bat than it does like the one in the book. Because so the German filmmaker who's making it did not have any permission whatsoever to use those story elements. So he tweaked some things, and even then it didn't quite pass muster. And so the Stoker estate had a judge order that every extant copy of Nosferatu be destroyed. Some of them weren't, obviously, because we have the movie available to us today. But that would have been the first time around. But obviously, Count Orlok looks very different from Dracula as he's described in the book. Horrifying, even. His front teeth are his fangs. He's got big old pointy ears. He's long taloned fingers. He looks like the monster that he is. But along comes Bela Lugosi, right? When Universal made theirs. And that dude could get down in some evening wear. Dapper as fuck the whole time, right? What is always interesting to me, though, is that the brooch that he wears is kind of cross-shaped. And they never address that, but that doesn't really matter. And as a result of that, Hollywood kind of picked up on this idea. They sort of ran with it, especially because Universal made a bunch of movies with Bela Lugosi as Dracula, and then there were a bunch of spin-offs and stuff. And later you get the Christopher Lee movies and the Hammer horror films and that sort of thing. And it was always very gentlemanly, right? With kind of a sexy air to him, which is really weird to say about a walking corpse. And then, in the 1970s, which Hammer was at like peak awesome in the 70s, by the way, you started getting other novels, right? Like there were novels about vampires that were written in the intervening time, but they were more relegated to like Pulp Fiction and Weird Tales magazine and that sort of thing. And they were monstrous creatures in those stories. But Anne Rice comes along and writes a little story called Interview with the Vampire. I don't remember what year that was. I think it was like 77 or 78. I could be wrong about that. And it changed fucking everything. Changed everything. No, I would actually say that Andrew Tate is prettier than Count Orlok. I would. Dude looks like a bat wearing a human skin. Nosferatu, not Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate just looks like a dude. Also, I don't, part of the reason we don't talk too much about Andrew Tate on this channel is because I don't care about Andrew Tate. He's just some dickbag as far as I'm concerned. And according to things that he said himself, possibly, very possibly, allegedly, and I'm only saying that because we're on YouTube, a sex trafficker. And which is awful. But it is his, like some of the shit that he said and some of the things he said about underage women and some of the timelines with some of his girlfriends don't really add up to like healthy adult relationship stuff. That said, enough about Andrew Tate. We're talking about vampires here. Although one could say he is a bit of a drain. I think dude's got some good points once in a while, but I think he's also an asshole on top of everything else. So, not really a fan. But yeah, Anne Rice comes along and she changes the game. She just straight up changes the game. And then due to the popularity of that, it just kind of changed all kinds of things. People started writing variants, and they started writing like sequels to Dracula and that kind of thing. Like P.N. Elrod wrote one called Quincy P. Moore's Vampire, which is actually pretty good, where the Texan in the story of Dracula who dies, right, didn't die. He got turned, and he wakes up and he finds out that they didn't actually kill Dracula. He just kind of faked his death so they'd go away and leave him the fuck alone. And it's actually not bad. It's actually not bad. I don't remember when that was published. I think that was like mid-90s, but then you get stuff like the Southern Vampire series, which started, I think, late 90s, early 2000s, right? Which is what True Blood on HBO is based on. And, things like Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake series, which features a ton of vampires, all of whom are extremely sexy. And she's one of the only ones, by the way, who went out of her way to explain the actual physical dynamics of vampire sex, which was upsetting.
Because I don't know, something's wrong with that woman, and all that. But and then you get and along comes Stephanie Meyer, right, in the early 2000s. I don't know. That first one might have been published in '99 or whatever. I don't know exactly. And she writes this little book called Twilight, and it all went to shit from there. Although I don't blame her for the direction that it took. I think she just capitalized on it. But her version of it changed things nearly irrevocably. So now we're not talking about undead monsters who feast on the living in the dark of night. We're talking about, you know, um, tortured little emo boys, who happen to be extraordinarily long lived and sparkle in the fucking sun, right? That's an entirely different creature to my mind. Entirely different. And we've been kind of sitting there ever since. Every once in a while you'll get something that comes out that's like, spits in the eye of that sparkly Twihard nonsense. But for the most part, yeah, pop culture pretty much picked that up and ran with it, which is unfortunate because in the old lore, in the old world, things are very, very different. In fact, most of the time, vampires are basically retarded because they're corpses. They're corpses that are inhabited by demons. And these demons are not particularly bright. They're just hungry. They smell like corpses. They look like corpses. You know, they're very easy to trick because they're kind of stupid. you know, so it's a whole thing. Welcome in, Aaron Laura. Good to see you. But yeah, I don't know. I like the old lore, but I grew up reading books like Vampires by a woman named Nancy Garden. She also wrote one on werewolves, which what that did was it talked a little bit about like fictional lore, but it also talked a lot about old world lore and the stories and the myths and all of that stuff, which is where all this sort of thing came from. So I grew up reading about like in her werewolf book, for example, right? There's an old world story. I think it comes out of Hungary. I'm not 100% certain about a man, a town that's being, terrorized by this wolf creature at night. It's eating, peasants left and right, mostly children. And this guy, he's a big burly hunter. He's like, well, I've got to take care of this thing. I got to save my people. So he goes out and he sets traps and he does the hunting thing night after night. He comes home empty-handed, and then one time, something stepped into one of his traps. Something big, something mean, something scary, very hairy. Anyway, it wounded its foreleg, its right foreleg. Could have been left. I don't know. It's not really relevant. And but it managed to get out of the trap and get away, but it was wounded. It was gravely wounded. And there's some versions of the story where like he shot it in the hand or chopped it in the hand or whatever. Kind of depends on when exactly you're talking about here. Anyway, the next day, right? He's like, oh, he's waking up. He's going to see his wife, and he's like, hey, I almost got that thing last night. I'm sure I'll get it tonight. And she's sitting there, and the same hand on her is bandaged because it's severely mangled. Right. And he discovers that his wife was the werewolf the whole time. Kind of thing. Those are the kinds of stories that I grew up on. And he has to kill her because, she's eating children. So kind of thing. But yeah, see, that's kind of where I was going with like Anne Rice. Anne Rice took what Bram Stoker did and she ran with it, and she created sort of this urban fantasy kind of genre. Not single-handedly, but certainly had a major hand in it. And if it was not for Anne Rice, and by extension, Bram Stoker, Stephanie Meyer would have achieved nowhere near the popularity that she did. Anne Rice laid the groundwork for that shit, which is why I'm not laying all of this at Stephanie Meyer's feet, because it isn't her fault. Like I said, I think she capitalized on an existing trend. And then, it made her oodles of fucking money. It made everybody in those movies stupid rich. But culturally speaking, I think that it did a disservice because it took the scary out of things that go bump in the night. You know, these are the things that we should be telling children about to keep them indoors, right? The things we should be using to scare the daylights out of them, witches and werewolves and goblins and vampires, you know, because they're allegories, right? They're allegories for the fact that you can't trust everyone in the world, and that there are things in the world that don't care who you are. They're going to hurt you regardless. And this is the lesson that children need to be taught. It also teaches them about the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, that sort of thing. And I think along with all the coddling and the hand holding that we've done as a society over the last 40 years, that's done an immense disservice. We no longer tell those stories to our children. I mean, look at kids' movies from the 80s versus kids' movies today, right? Immense difference. You know, I just rewatched The Neverending Story the other day. That movie is fucking dark. And I'm not just talking about the Artax scene. It is dark, right? The entire thing is about grief and loss and pushing through it anyway. You know, it's it's about despair, and it's about the death of childhood and the mundanity of adulthood. I mean, it is a very starkly just the messaging in that movie is so powerful. And it's all presented with these puppets and these animatronics and these cute images and stuff like that. But the actual image, like for instance, right after Artax dies, and I'm not spoiling anything here, guys. If you haven't seen the Neverending Story, you're about 40 years too fucking late for me to worry about spoilers. So we're just move past it. So after Artax dies in the swamp of sadness, because he gives in to the sadness, right? It's the sadness itself that kills him. It's not the swamp. Right? The swamp can't drag you down if you don't give in to the sadness. And he makes that choice and he drowns. Right? After that, he comes upon the turtle, who is supposed to be the wisest, most ancient being ever in Fantasia. And the turtle doesn't give a shit about saving anything, about doing anything. He just doesn't care. Doesn't care. He even has a line where he says, "We don't even care about how much we don't care." Which is the stage after depression when you get into apathy, right? That turtle represents apathy, which is immensely damaging. you know, it's where self-sabotage begins, and sabotage of others. It was really, really interesting movie, actually. If you haven't seen it lately, I go back and watch it with dull eyes. It's got a lot of lessons in there for young ones, and they're hard lessons. They're hard lessons about grief and about sadness and despair and love and the transience of life and pushing through it anyway. It's like it basically, if you were to boil the Neverending Story down to one concept, it would be life sucks. It's going to keep sucking, and it's going to do everything it can to drag you down with it. And you just have to fucking push through it anyway. That's the lesson. Yeah, it's nightmare fuel. I mean, it is. It is, because what it's actually about are very real things, very real nightmares, you know? So, yeah, I just, but again, from the 80s, right? From the 80s. What are they doing now? Right? Don't get me wrong. I liked Inside Out, right? I got kids. I saw a lot of the Pixar movies. I liked Inside Out overall. I thought it was a pretty good movie, and I think it touches on a lot of the same things that I just mentioned with the Neverending Story, but it does it there's a lot of hand holding in it. There's a lot of like, yeah, it's okay to be sad, but I mean, you got to be happy too. And it's cutesy with it in a way that the Neverending Story isn't. It's with the Neverending Story, the cute stuff isn't there to soften the blow. It's there so you don't see the sucker punch coming. you know. Whereas, with something like Inside Out, which essentially has kind of the same messaging, right? It's it's softened. The blow is considerably softened, and it's watered down. And they do it more with comedy, I think, than they do with anything else in that movie. And I like the movie overall. I thought it was a good movie, but it also had some very fucking adult references in it too, which I wasn't super happy about. Like there's the whole bit where they're going through Cloud Town, and Homeboy gets smushed because he's made of cloud, and apparently it kills him. They don't outright say it, but they imply that dude's dead. And his wife is given, a statement, and then she gets whacked too. And then at one point, one of the cops looks at the other, and he's like, "Forget it, Jake. It's Cloud Town." That is a direct reference to a Roman Polanski movie. This very same Roman Polanski, who was dating Sharon Tate before she got murdered by the Manson family. The very same Roman Polanski who fled the country after some shenanigans with some underage people and has remained there ever since, because if he ever steps foot in the United States, he's going to fucking prison. That Roman Polanski. Although, to be fair, Chinatown is a pretty good movie. Jack Nicholson's in it, and Faye Dunaway. But I would recommend watching it. It is a good movie. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things where they take some of the concepts that we should be teaching children, and they put them into these films, and they water the concepts down so much that most of these kids never see past the cute characters, right? They don't really like, they got to be at a certain developmental level in order to glean any of the actual messaging from it. And even then, the messaging is just like, in that case, it's okay to be sad, which it is. There's nothing wrong with that lesson. In the never-ending story, it tells you you're going to be sad. It's gonna suck. And you gotta power through. You know? It's really about the tone, I guess, of the messaging. And I think we just kind of lost our way a little bit there. And these monsters from folklore, these vampires, these werewolves, these goblins, elves, even, elves got prettified like a motherfucker in pop culture, and I blame a lot of that on J.R.R. Tolkien, which is, I don't have a problem with his works. I like his works. They're very good. The world building is very rich. Characters are very detailed. It's really an amazing accomplishment. But one thing that it did do was that it convinced the entire fantasy reading world that elves were friendly-ish, and just like everybody else. Whereas in the old world lore, they steal children and replace them with adult elves who kind of look like children that then go around causing havoc. They hunt people like deer. They wear human skin as clothing. They lie, they cheat, and they steal. If on a good day, they might turn you into a tree for forever. And those are the nice ones, the nicest ones, rather. So they a lot of that stuff's been watered down for modern audiences, and I think it's a shame, because I think we should understand the horror of the old folklore. I do. So Up, I gotta admit, old Blendy, Up is one of my very favorite Pixar movies. I fucking love that movie. I do. It's and it is that one. They did a good job with that one. Because it wasn't just about death. It was about grief and loss, but it was also about finding new life after the fact, right? And there was also some stuff in there about finding your family too. Because if you recall, Russell, his dad doesn't show up to anything. He went out for fucking cigarettes and took off on him. So by the end of the movie, our main character shows up at his ceremony where they're giving him his final badge that he was trying to get for helping a senior citizen. He shows up and he pins it on him himself, and or he pins him the adventurer badge made out of the bottle cap that his wife had given him when they were kids. And it's is about new beginnings. It's not just about endings. It is about new beginnings as well. It's about how life is a cycle, and it was very well done. Plus, the first 10 fucking minutes of that movie are a real goddamn tearjerker. You know? But yeah, I highly recommend Up. Up is fantastic. Plus, like the guy flies his house to South America with a bunch of fucking balloons, man. Like it was a wildly imaginative movie. You know? So yeah, Santa's elves are slaves, for being honest, Jacob Gallo. So I like Up. Up is good. Aaron says, I've never watched a whole Pixar movie. The animation style makes me uncomfortable. I mean, I get that. I mean, it's almost all CGI instead of like it's not hand drawn or anything like that. And honestly, too much CGI on the screen makes my eyes feel like they're gonna fucking bleed if it's badly done. Um, but there's a few that they did that I think are probably worth powering through. You know, but like I'm one of those guys. I went to see the Phantom Menace in theaters when that came out, right? Because I was like, oh, new Star Wars, just like everybody else at the time. And this scene towards the end of the movie where the Gungans and the battle droids are facing off on the battlefield and all that stuff, that entire thing is done with late 90s CGI, and it makes my goddamn eyes feel like they're melting out of my skull. I hate watching that shit. It's horrendous. So that's good to know, Larry, and welcome in. So, yeah, Wall-E is a Pixar movie. Yeah, Wall-E is a Pixar movie. Wall-E is a movie that has some cute little stuff in it that I don't object to, but its whole purpose is environmentalist nonsense. No, I have other problems with that movie. My ex-wife loves it. It's one of her very favorites, but she's a tree hugger and a green freak. So, it tracks. But I don't know. It was cute for what it was, but and I think it made some good points about, if we have it too easy, then we become fat and slovenly. That's also true. I don't have an issue with that particular message, but the whole like, oh yeah, we destroyed our Earth. Like the game I'm playing right now, Solar Blade has a very similar kind of, we fucked up the planet and had to leave, and now we're coming back to take it back from the things that we did to fuck it up in the first place. Kind of feel to it, and I'm just like, I mean, at least in this case, it seems like it was an apocalyptic war as opposed to we just fucking piled the trash so high we couldn't find our living room. you know? So, yeah. When are we making a movie about Abe getting people or write a grim tale about Abe? I don't know. It's I think Larry's probably could run that a little better than I could. He's a little more practiced and a little more current on his storytelling than I am. As a matter of fact, if you go over to his channel Night's Lore, he's been telling stories over there. And all that. So, but yeah, I don't know that I would do that. I think it is what it is. So, but I like some of the Pixar movies. They're fine. Some of them are. I liked. As a matter of fact, there's kind of some consistent themes through some of them, right? So you got Up, which is about moving on. You've got Toy Story, which is about growing up and moving on. You know, I think Wally's more about like, coming back after we've moved on, but moving on seems to figure in a lot of these. I don't know, but I haven't seen any new ones in years either. I think the last new one that I watched was fuck, I don't know. I don't know, man. I can't remember if Frozen is a Pixar movie or not. I know it's a Disney film, and Disney and Pixar work together a lot, but the last one of those that I watched was, I think, Frozen 2, and I never finished it because, I was there with my youngest, and she got scared, during the salamander sequence because she was pretty young at the time, and so we left the theater and, left my oldest there to finish the movie and came back and picked her up later. But, so I've never seen that whole thing, but and that was, like, fucking 10 years ago, maybe? So, No idea how that ends. On that, I didn't really like the first one very much. No, I thought it was kind of it was fun the first time, but when you have kids, you end up watching the movies that they like over and over and over ad nauseum, right? Like if I never see Nomeo and Juliet again, I will die a happy fucking man. I hate that fucking movie. You know? Same thing with Frozen. I don't ever want to be presented with that fucking movie again because my kids watched it on repeat for years. It was horrendous. It's the worst thing ever. No, my oldest was not 6 at the time. She was 15. So the other one was about 6, about 5, 5, 6. Anyway, she got scared and we left. And then the oldest one was 14, 15 years old, and came back and got her later. So, well, no, the youngest would have been. There's a significant age gap between the two of them. Anyway, doesn't really matter. But yeah, no, the other one was a teenager. So it was fine. Yeah, Aaron, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Please do like, subscribe, share, pass it around like I don't know, herpes in a prison. you know, let it be known. Let it be known, kind of thing. So, but anyway, back to the whole monsters thing. I think that popular culture, and especially Hollywood and that sort of thing, I think watered down. Well, Hollywood and modern fiction have watered down the nightmarish things that we used to tell our kids so they'd stay out of the fucking deep dark woods, right? And just because the woods are gone doesn't mean the danger is, and I think that's a real problem. You know, um, I think kids are simultaneously more and less trusting now than they used to be, and that particular combination it puts them in this like pretty vulnerable state where they're prone to ignoring everything that they should be listening to from the people they should be listening to, but they will happily do the Pinocchio, let's hop on the boat to Pleasure Island just because some fucking fox show and cat show up, and they're like, hey, you gonna go play games all day and have no responsibilities, and then get turned into fucking donkeys. So right, right, nursery rhymes with I mean, like a lot of the ones we used to sing when I was a kid, like Ring Around the Rosie. It's not a nice story. It's not a nice story at all. It has to do with burning bodies after the Black Plague. And the whole Rosie thing, that's because roses help cover up the stench of death. You get enough roses in one place, the scent is pretty strong. Yeah, that was, it was somebody brought this up the other day. I think this would have been on Abyssal Musings when I had to dip out for a minute because my computer was all fucked up. And unless it might have been screaming into the void. Anyway, either way, somebody brought up La Cucaracha, which is a Mexican song about love and loss, and wait for it, suicide. It's about the cockroaches that are featured in it because that's what La Cucaracha means. It means cockroach or the cockroach. It's basically these two cockroaches. They fall in love, a boy and a girl, and the girl dies due to circumstances or whatever. And the boy falls into a deep despair and ultimately fucking Romeo and Juliet's himself through the course of the song. And it's got this upbeat tempo and these like kind of like happy sounding lyrics and shit if you don't understand Spanish. And it's the darkest fucking song. Say la cucaracha, la cucaracha. It sounds happy. It's not. So, whereas you get another song like there's a song called De Colores, which is to the best of my knowledge, and because my Spanish sucks, so don't take my word for it, but to the best of my knowledge, is actually about like the changing of the seasons, right? It's about the leaves in the autumn, right? De Colores, the colors, and it sounds like this mournful dirge, and it's not really. It's just like, hey, this is really pretty. Let's sing about it, you know. So I don't know. With Mexican songs, Mexican music, you really got to actually like parse out what the lyrics mean, because the tempo and the beat are not going to actually tell you what it's about. You know? So La Bamba, for instance, one of the most famous Spanish songs of all time, right? Made famous by Richie Valens. That song is about a sailor who is getting shipped out the next day. So he's trying to talk this chick into banging him before that night, so that, he can have his way with her and then leave in the morning with his crew, right? But he's just a sailor, right? But in the song, they have the lyrics, "Yo no soy marinero, soy capitán," right? He is lying through his fucking teeth. He says, "Oh, I'm not a sailor. I'm not a deckhand. I'm the captain," right? He's trying to impress her into bed. That's the whole song, man. You know, there's a para baila la bamba. Would you dance the lambada with me? Which is sort of a flowery way of saying the horizontal lambada. uh, I'll never see Charles the same way again, right? So, like when especially foreign language songs, but Spanish in particular, right? Always figure out what those lyrics are talking about, because you never know. You never know what that's going to be. It was excuse me. It was a very funny realization when I found out about that, because we had to sing all this stuff when I was in like grade school or whatever, um, for like choir and that kind of thing. And like having to figure out what these songs, we didn't actually have to know what we were singing, which is another problem that we get with a lot of the youth. They don't, even with like songs in English, or what passes for fucking English in some parts of the United States. Half the time they'll sing along with it and they don't really understand what it is they're saying. You know, not just because some songs are coded, because some songs are, but not all of them are. But you get like, 11, 12, 13-year olds singing along to Tootsie Roll, which is a song about a big black dick, you know. And this has been true for decades and decades. I'm not even talking about like, hip hop culture and stuff, because that came later. You go back to, I think it was the 1950s. There was a song about this chick. She was like, "I got a brand new pair of roller skates. You got a brand new key." I don't remember what it's called or who did it, but that song's about fucking. She's using um, metaphor to describe. Let's get busy with it. That song is about fucking. It's always been about fucking. They just said it in a way that would have been airwave friendly back in the 50s. Might have been the 60s. I don't really recall, but it was like my own mom told me that she grew up listening to that song. And then she was like, when I figured out what she was talking about, I was like, oh my God, I've been singing along with that for decades. So, it was the funniest shit, man. So I was like, that's why you should be careful with the music and the media that you present to your children, because you never know what the messaging is actually going to be, or what it's actually about. Or, you get like a band like Tool, for example, and their stuff is intentionally obscured and open to interpretation, because it's kind of the whole point of the band, right? Um, if they can't parse out what it is they're actually singing along with, they don't know what they're letting into their heads, right? It could be perfectly innocent. That's possible, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is, you know. So yeah, it's just one of those things. I guess if you got kids, fucking monitor what they intake. You know, if you want them to grow up right, monitor what they intake. My mom sure as hell did with me. In fact, I would go so far as to call myself, in some regards, not as much as some others I knew, but in some regards, fairly sheltered when I was a boy. There were certain things mom did not want to have around me. My dad, on the other hand, was like, "It'll be fine. Don't tell your mom." you know. So, right, special sings the hits. Yeah, it sings the hits that are like 70 fucking years old. Sure. It might have been. I don't know, man. I haven't seen Boogie Nights in years. I don't remember the soundtrack at all, but it might have been, yeah. So I too saw Hell's Bells and know the devil uses backwards lyrics to worship Satan. I mean, the Beatles did it to fuck with people, you know, during the satanic panic of the 50s and 60s. You know, the Helter Skelter. Yeah. I don't think they actually meant any of that, like, shit they were accused of, because rock and roll was the devil or whatever. I think that it was a diss track basically on all the people who were going around saying that they were the devil. But it did happen, and I don't know about the whole backwards lyrics thing. I think that a lot of that got trumped up, because here's the thing. You can go too far in the other direction too, right? You can go too far in the other direction. When you shelter someone to the point where they're completely unaware of the world around them, they're also completely unprepared for it. And that's what like the various satanic panics over the years have attempted to do, was to just put bubble wrap around the ears of every child in America. And frankly, first of all, right, that's not like a committee or a congressional hearings job, right? That is the parent's job. You need to be responsible for what your child intakes, period. No one else, right? It's your child, your responsibility, and other people need to step the fuck off and let you take that responsibility. And they would go, too far. I mean, the whole reason that we have those little like advisory parental advisory explicit lyrics kind of stickers and shit on like CDs and stuff is because of some shit that happened in the 90s with congressional hearings during the satanic panic of that era, right? Um, Specifically guys like Marilyn Manson, although he was a little bit late to the party, because it actually began with a hearing with a rap group called Two Live Crew, who had a bunch of extremely sexually explicit lyrics. And they were kind of the beginning of getting the ball rolling on that. But the same thing happened in the 50s with the Comics Code Authority, which, by the way, is not an authority. It has never been an authority. It's a committee of quote unquote concerned adults who didn't think children should be seeing the messaging in comic books. So there was a reason we went 20 years without fucking horror comics being published in this country, right? Because if it didn't have the Comics Code Authority stamp of approval on the cover, it didn't get sold. Publishers wouldn't publish it. Vendors wouldn't sell them, kind of thing, because they were intimidated into it by this like pseudo mafia of quote unquote, again, concerned adults. Kind of thing. And eventually that fell off in like the mid 80s, early 90s, particularly when Image made its debut, because they were basically like, fuck the Comics Code Authority. And as it turns out, if you market it right, you can sell without their approval. And they proved everybody wrong about that. But for decades, those people held sway over everything that was published, which is why horror comics were really big in the 50s. But by the 60s, they'd basically been eradicated all the way up through the mid to late 80s. I mean, you could still find some, but they were a niche thing. And it was just because a couple of adults went in and they were just like, I think this is really bad. It's like the Wyoming Liquor Commission, right? So we have this thing in my state called the Wyoming Liquor Commission. And essentially what they do is they monitor what comes in and what goes out of the state in terms of alcohol, right? Alcohol consumption. They have a list of 100 types of alcohols and liqueurs and that sort of thing. And those are the only ones allowed to be brought in to the state, right? So if you want to bring something new into the state, something else on that list has to go. Well, how do you make that happen? You get in bed with them and you slip them some cash under the table. That's how. And further, like the Comics Code Authority, they have no real fucking authority, right? They're not a government body. They're just a group of people who found a way to fucking make money, being convince everybody that they were all official like. And so everybody just kind of goes along with it, because they come in, they're like, oh, well, it's like fucking union shit, right? And which is funny because this is a non-union state, you know. So yeah, you can't you gotta look into these things and decide like who's saying this. Is it somebody who just wants to basically dictate stuff? Is it somebody who's genuinely actually concerned? Do their concerns hold water? Like you got to look into this stuff. I would say with the Comics Code Authority, they were completely out of fucking pocket. It was the 1950s, I will say that, but they were completely out of pocket, and I think that they were controlling in a way that didn't need to be. I think that market would have self-regulated, and I think it has for the most part self-regulated up until like the last 20 years when it got taken over by a bunch of people who can't write their way out of paper bags and think everybody needs to be sitting around a coffee table talking about their fucking feelings instead of beating up bad guys. But whatever, you know. Same thing with the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, the ones who give out the ratings. Not an official government thing. It's never been an official government thing. It's a group of quote unquote concerned citizens who go around. And by the way, they've been around for so fucking long, they're basically institutionalized now. But again, not really a government agency. They have no real authority whatsoever. What they can do is they can pour poison in the ears of your distributors and they could blacklist you. Right? Because now they're so intimately entwined in the process that it's like cutting cancer that's metastasized out. It's impossible to do. But they don't have any real authority. They can't tell you that you can't make a movie or whatever. Problem is they got all of the distributors and the theaters and whatnot convinced that if it doesn't have a rating from these guys, then it can't be played in their theaters, which again, not true at all. There's no statute against it. So just keep that in mind. And I think there's a similar organization actually in Canada, but none of those ratings are meant to be taken as law anyway. They're all suggestions for the viewer. It's just like, hey, this is rated R. It might be a little intense. Hey, this is rated PG. You could probably, be fine if you brought your kids to it, kind of thing. But they're just suggestions. It's not rule of law. There's no power behind it besides mob-like groups who think that they get to decide what you can and can't look at. So that's why you can only listen to I Want to Hold Your Hand at nude strip club. Do people actually strip to that fucking song, man? That'd be wild. I haven't been in a strip club in years. I had no idea the Beatles were making a comeback, man. Yeah. 1990s VHS series about rock and roll having hidden secret messages. Yeah. We all had to watch that shit in class because, again, they convinced everybody they had some kind of real authority. They didn't. They still don't. But again, so ingrained. It's like when the commie motherfuckers who took over and essentially, inverted what Disney was supposed to be, what the Walt Disney Company was supposed to be. And they slandered the man's good name and they started telling everybody, oh, he was an anti-Semite. Oh, he was a Nazi sympathizer, none of which is true. And you can't prove that it's true because there is no fucking evidence beyond what commies said about him. Doesn't exist. Never happened. But it was just people who walked in and acted as though they had the authority to demand these things and these changes and these whatevers. And everybody just kind of went along with it because they acted like they fucking knew what they were talking about. So that's I don't know, man. I think sometimes we're a little too restrictive. I know that's not a super conservative thing to say, but honestly, I do. I think we're a little too restrictive. I think some things need to be restricted, but we need to take it on a case by case basis because some things may not be as fucking offensive as you might think. And the problem with art is that it is entirely subjective, right? So what's offensive to, say, me might not be to, say, Old Blondie or to Aaron Laura or to Jacob Gallo or or to Beak. And it's not even, it doesn't even necessarily have to be offensive. It just might not be appealing even, right? Like I have a real problem with pastoral watercolors. right? And it isn't because they're displaying anything that's morally offensive, but they're kind of visually offensive to me. They're just smears of bland, yeah, as far as I'm concerned. I also have a problem with impressionism. Monet, worst fucking artist of all time, in my opinion. I think he's extremely overrated. I think everything that man ever painted looks like dog shit. I'm also outvoted on that because everybody else in the fucking world thinks the opposite. You know, I think his paintings are too goddamn busy. So it just kind of depends on the eye of the beholder, as it were, in some ways. And I think we need to treat it like that in a lot of ways, as opposed to making these like blanket sweeping, you know, you can't have anything to do with this type of thing nonsense that we see a lot of. You know, it goes back and forth. Left and right do this shit, right? The right's like, you can't listen to that music. It glorifies this and this and this. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it might, but if a parent's doing their job, the kid's never gonna fucking listen to it anyway if the parent doesn't want them to, right? And the left comes along and says, oh, you can't have video games with like, hot chicks in it. And I'm only pulling that out of my ass because I'm currently playing one with a lot of jiggle physics. Um, one that was, in fact, there was controversy about when it came out because some people were very upset about the jiggle physics and other people were very upset that they covered up the jiggle physics. It was a whole thing. Anyway, point is you get people on both sides who are screaming about something they consider offensive, but what they consider offensive is not universally offensive on either side. And I think we need to make more allowances for that. Honestly, I'm going to take a drink now. It's just it's too easy to get your panties in a bunch these days over stupid shit. F10 pastoral watercolor. Yes, definitely. In my opinion, pastoral watercolor sucks. It's offensive to my eyes. It looks like somebody fucking, I don't know, threw up fruit snacks all over the canvas. It doesn't look good to me. I prefer realism. I like surrealism. I like things that, have defined edges. So it's what it is, I guess. But there are other things I like because my taste in art tends to run towards the bleak, right? And the dark. A lot of things like Giger, like H.R. Giger. I fucking love his artwork. There are people who think that he should be censored wherever he goes because a lot of it can be very easily interpreted to be extremely graphic sexually, and some of it is. Um, and in very disturbing ways. He does this whole biomechanoid series where it's basically a bunch of like cyborg chicks sucking off their mechanical parts kind of thing. It's a whole series that he did. And I could see where that would be disturbing and upsetting to some people. Aesthetically, for me, I love it. You know. Now, I couldn't have any of that stuff around while I was raising my kids because you don't want to color their view of the world through the view of the guy who designed the fucking xenomorph from Alien at all. you know? But I like stuff like that. I liked one of my ex-wife is a photographer, and one of my very favorite shots she ever took was this. She found this burnt out cabin on some relative or other's property that, and the cabin had been burnt out and abandoned for like half a century or more. All right, a lot of really old stuff in there. Some farming implements that are no longer used that are straight up antiques that nobody uses. Rusted the shit in there, and she took this stark black and white photo of a corner of the room, of the main room, because it was like a cabin, so it had one room basically. And she did some tweaking with the coloration and all that stuff. So everything in it is black and white except for one child's shoe, which is in full color. Right? It's one of my very favorite photos that she ever did. It's fucking incredible. I wish I had a copy of it, but she doesn't talk to me about that shit anymore to show you guys. And it is one of those like It reminds me honestly of like parts of Schindler's List, right? Like the little girl in the red coat, everything else is in black and white, but you see that girl, she stands out, and you know something. And then when you see that coat again, you're like, oh no, it's kind of got that sort of atmosphere to it, right? Except this is just a discarded child's shoe in a shack from like fucking however long ago. Nobody, as far as I know, died horribly in there. They just left stuff behind. But it's a very, very cool photo. But I could understand how that could be disturbing to some people, right? Some people like happy, bright colors and, rainbows and suns with smiley faces and shit and, just the kind of inane shit that we drew as children. Some people prefer that. And I'm not going to deny them that, even if I find that kind of visually offensive too, because it's just, ugh. you know, but, I think that's something that we need to work on as a culture and as a people and as a society is just where we draw the line in terms of what is and is not acceptable, right? Like I think there are some things that are hard line that should be accepted by everybody. Like obviously, um, child exploitation stuff needs to be nixed utterly, and anybody who has anything to do with it in any capacity needs to be removed from society, excised, if you will, like the cancers that they are. That I think is something that everybody should fucking agree on, right? Left, right, center, whatever. However, there's also been exhibits where, and this is one I'm pulling off the top of my head. I think this was in the New York Metropolitan Art Museum. I might be wrong about it, but it was basically a guy took a shit and he bronzed it and he put it out there as like avant garde. And I personally find that disgusting and not art at all. But I don't think it's something necessarily that I would, shut down or try to prevent other people from seeing just because I find it objectionable. Because ultimately, it's not doing any harm. It's just a piece of shit, quite literally. You know? So, I mean, my own father was a painter, right? Um, that's what he did for a living. He painted like buildings and houses and that sort of thing. But he was also an artist, went to art school, did all the things. And one of the most interesting pieces he ever did, and also arguably one of the most offensive, not the most, but one of, was this painting he called Irish Surprise. And it was like 3 feet in height and like 8 feet long or whatever. And basically it depicted this park bench with four dudes sitting on it. And the first three dudes are just dressed head to fucking toe in like the most dapper evening wear ever. And the way the sight lines follow is you go from left to right. You go up the one dude's foot and you see him, and then his like arm leads down to the other guy's shoulder. You see him, his hand leads to the next guy and down that guy's foot, and that foot is connected to the fourth man, who isn't wearing anything. He's butt fucking naked. And as your eye line travels up the man's foot to the crotch region where you see everything, and up again, you see at the very tippy top of this fourth figure, my father's face staring at you as if to ask, fuck are you looking at? And it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life, but it is pretty fucking offensive. And he calls it Irish Surprise. Called, rather. Dude's been dead for like 20 years. That was times were different when he was in art school. And I hope I described that well. It's very hard to describe that without you actually seeing it. I wish that I had that somewhere too, just to fuck with people because I think it's funny. But I, I don't. I don't have any idea what happened to the vast majority of his paintings. I assume they went to one of his other fucking bastard children, um, or were destroyed or auctioned off or sold, or maybe his sister took them. She's an artist too, and all that. But I don't have a whole lot of connection to that side of the family, so I don't really know. I don't really know. But that one was interesting. That one was it wasn't the most offensive thing he'd ever done. The most offensive thing he ever did was when he was in college, and he told me about this because the piece no longer exists because when I describe it to you, you'll understand why it doesn't. It can't. Um, and he was to turn in a project that was like, avant-garde and was like taking risks and doing all this shit. I forget exactly what the parameters were, but and my late father was one of those assholes who would fulfill the parameters to the letter and yet somehow offend every sensibility a person would have at the same time. I employed this method later with writing when I was in high school. I I made all my English teachers cry, you know, because I would do exactly what they asked me to the letter, but the exact imagery that I would invoke would be pretty fucked up. Um, and they couldn't really punish me for it because I would write well and I would again fulfill all of their parameters. It would just be upsetting content. And then so he goes and he makes this mobile, right? Like y'all know mobiles, the things they got like multiple things hanging off of a fucking coat hanger or whatever. And he makes this mobile out of meat. Went down to the butcher shop and he took a bunch of meat and he hung it up on these little hooks and he made a mobile out of it and he let that shit simmer in a hot studio for 3 weeks before he turned it in. I forget what he called it, but it was something retarded. And the whole reason was because he thought the assignment was stupid. So he's like, "Fuck you! I'll do exactly what you asked me to, but you ain't gonna like it." And it was just rotting meat on hooks with flies and shit flying around him. Like so rotten that the meat had started to go like super gangrenous looking. you know, like because all of it was raw when he started. None of it was cooked. I'm sure you could get like fucking, I don't know, trichinosis just by looking at the damn thing. And I don't know, that might go some way to explaining me a little bit, I guess. I didn't really know the man that well, but apparently some things are inherited and not so much nurture, they're just nature. Which is something I found out my own self with my own children that some things just get passed along, and that's just the way that it is. Like a way of moving or a look in the eye or like a tick or a sense of humor or whatever. Some traits just get passed along. Traits that you think that they would have to like be around for to influence you in a certain way, but aren't. You know. So it's weird. Genetics is strange like that. So, and apparently I do a number of things like he did, and I didn't really know him. I met him when I was like 14, 15 years old. Well, I was like 14 when I met him, but I ended up moving in with him when I was 15, almost 16, and that didn't go well for either one of us, I think. But long story short, like I was coming into adulthood and he was in his 40s and we didn't really know each other. Of course, the more we got to know each other, the less and less we fucking liked each other. So sometimes it goes that way, I guess. But apparently there are certain traits and ticks and behaviors and, glints in the eye or whatever, according to my mother, that I have in common with him and that I've had in common with him my entire fucking life, despite having very little exposure to him until I was halfway through my teens. you know? So it's just one of those things, man. I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. It's kind of like how my youngest sleeps with her eyes open, like I do. I didn't think that was a genetic thing. I just thought that was some fucking weird, thing that I did. I was always getting told I was freaking people out my whole childhood and teenage years because they would see me sleeping and think I was dead because my eyes were open and my cheeks were sunken a little bit because my mouth was open a little bit. And I'd be dead asleep, but I wasn't actually dead, right? And I thought that was just me. I thought that was just like a little quirk. I didn't think that was something that gets passed on, but my youngest does it too. When she was an infant, you know how when you take naps, you never like you always have the infant close to you and all that stuff, but you want to be like sort of half aware even when you sleep because you don't want anything to happen to them. And apparently, my ex-wife has pictures of this and video, by the way. Um, Apparently, one time I laid her down for a nap and I passed out as well, and we both did that at the same time, and she had to check our breathing against a mirror because she thought we were both dead. We're fine, just sleeping, but we looked like corpses. No, just me and this infant. uh, Times were that was a weird time. I woke up and I was like, and she woke up and we're just like, hey, yeah, let's go do stuff now. Let's go out and play or whatever and all that. And we got out to her mom looking at us both like, what the fuck did you guys put me through? As if we did it on purpose. Not a zombie exactly. I don't know. I'll tell you another story involving much the similar. When I was about 15 years old, I was living maybe 16. I was living with my father at this point, and he was a big muckety muck in the local AA program, right? So like he was known over throughout the region and all that stuff. Been kind of a big deal, that sort of thing. And so they would do these retreats, right? With the AA, they go on campouts and stuff. And I went on a few of those just because. Actually, the girl I lost my virginity to, I met on one of those, and all that. But one of the kids I went to school with, who wasn't really friends with me, we sort of knew people in common. We were friend adjacent, but we weren't really friends at all. But our parents were because they were all involved in this AA shit. Right. So they had to go off to a big conference. So I ended up getting stuck staying at his place uh, because, it was one of those things. They didn't want to leave me alone in the house or whatever. Our relationship was very new. I don't think they trusted me yet. And so I ended up having this whole like 3 day sleepover with this kid that I barely fucking knew, who we knew some of the same people, but we didn't really know each other at all. And so I'm sleeping on the floor, right? Because that's what you do. You get a sleeping bag and you sleep on the fucking floor. Well, I wake up the next day on that first night, and the next morning I wake up, and when you sleep with your eyes open is a funny thing. Like when you wake up, how you kind of blink awake, right? Things come into focus as you blink to sleep out of your eyes. It's a little bit different if you just sleep with your eyes open, if you haven't been blinking all night, right? Everything's just sort of crusted into fucking place, first of all, because no moisture and your eyes are hurt and they're red and your vision just sort of comes into focus, right? There's no blinking or anything like that. So as consciousness dawns, so too does your vision. And the first thing I see is this dude about 2 inches away from my nose, staring at me. So I screamed because what the fuck, right? Scared the hell out of me. I was like, whoa, I didn't know where I was. I had this dude staring at me. It was just, it freaked me out. So I screamed at him. And then he screamed back at me because I didn't open my eyes. I just started, my eyes were already open. I just started screaming in his face like I had come back from the dead. uh, he did not appreciate that. Ah, to be young again. I still do that shit now. It just, it takes longer for me to focus because my eyes are getting older. So, oh, anyway, um, I don't really know where I'm going with this at this point. I just thought that was a fun fucking story. So, That was I had to actually have a conversation with him after that, after we both calmed down and stopped screaming because the entire experience freaked us both out. Um, like he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Fucking waking up. What are you doing?" He was like, "You were dead." And I was like, "No, I fucking wasn't." Yeah, it was a good time, but in retrospect, it was a good time. It was rather traumatic at the in the moment, but we had to have a conversation after that about, like, it's fine. Sometimes I sleep with my eyes open. Don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. I'm not actually dead. I know I breathe shallow when I'm asleep too, so it's a whole thing. Yeah, well, it you're not alone in that. It bothers a lot of people. So, and here's the thing, is they act like I'm doing it on fucking purpose. I'm asleep. I have no control over that. It just happens. So, uh, I had to have a long talk with my ex-wife too when we were first getting together, and she first started noticing that stuff because I was like, I don't think about it, man. It just happens, you know. And the first time she noticed that stuff, she freaked out a little bit too, and she actually did check my pulse and all this, and because she thought she was in bed with a dead man. And, I mean, that would freak anybody out, really. Once she figured it out and the fact that, I was still warm and, that, yeah, that it was shallow, but my pulse and my breathing were both detectable. You just had to, like, actually try to find them. Um, and I got weird veins, man. My pulse is a little hard to find even when I'm awake. So it's there. It's just you gotta kind of look for it a little bit. Um, it's it's a conversation I've had to have multiple times in my life, and when you have something going on, right, that you get tired of explaining to people. I've had a number of things where I've had to say the same things over and over and over and over again to new people or to people who forgot or to whatever, and everybody's got something like that in their life, right? This one I never get tired of because it's fucking funny. You know? Right? I mean, yeah, I guess I should count my blessings. Nobody bothered to toe tag me. That's 100% true, man. Yeah. So I've never done that. I've never woken up in a morgue, or a coffin or anything like that. And this was early years too, when I was still sleeping like the dead. So like you could drive a fucking freight train through my house and I wouldn't notice at that age. You know, um, Nothing would wake me up. I'd sleep for like 12, 14 hours a day, and I'd just be basically dead to the world that entire time, just sleeping. Later on in my early 20s, when I started getting involved in the MMA and some other stuff that I'm not going to go into detail here. So I had this roommate for a long time, and like, y'all ever see the old Pink Panther movies, right? Where Clouseau has this like Asian manservant who ambushes him every once in a while just to keep him on his toes, like jumps out of the fucking ironing board and smacks him around and then gets fought off and all that stuff. So I had a roommate who thought that that was quote unquote training. So he would pull that shit on us, on me specifically. So it got to a point where he trained me to sleep lightly, to sleep very lightly. And now I start swinging the baseball bat before I even fucking wake up. It takes very little. If I hear this slightest thing out of the ordinary of what should be, I freak the fuck out and I just start swinging, and I wake up in the middle of that, you know, uh, and all that because this dude I lived with for a couple of years kept trying. I started putting fucking homemade caltrops on the goddamn windowsills to keep him from breaking into the second story window and all that to surprise me or whatever. It was bad. It was bad. Yeah. Also, fun fact, homemade caltrops are really easy to make. All you gotta do is get some, like, old school metal tacks, um, jacks, sorry, jacks, right? You remember jacks, where you toss the ball, gather as many as you can, catch the ball, um, and sharpen them. 'Em. That'll do it. But yeah, I started doing shit like that. I started booby trapping my room and various other places because I didn't want to get fucking surprised by a guy who was attacking me, who I also paid rent alongside. It's not fucking fun, you know. So now I sleep light, which is both a blessing and a curse because now I wake up very quickly, but um, it's not always pleasant for anybody else who's in the room. So, unless I'm familiar with your noises and your sounds, like say with my wife or my children, that kind of thing. If I know your how I know how you move through the air, right? Then I'll sleep through that, or at least I'll be aware of you, but I won't react. But yeah, if something fucking out of the ordinary happens, boom, awake. So, and it's all his fault. It's all that roommate's fault because before him, a tornado could drop on my head, and I'd pay it no mind whatsoever. I'd carry on sleeping and wake up in Kansas. You know? So that is just the way it is. Just the way it or was rather. It is no longer that way now, which is part of the reason I think because so as you guys know, I suffer from and I say suffer from because that's just the phrase intermittent insomnia, which means that sometimes I can't sleep for lengthy periods and sometimes I can and it just comes and goes and all that. And that's been a thing since I was about 11, 12 years old. But it wasn't as bad then. I mean, I would have problems where I would go like a couple of weeks without sleep, and that'd fuck me up pretty bad when I was a kid. But it wasn't as consistently bad as it is now because I still have that exact same problem. There are periods where I just can't fucking sleep. But now, when I can sleep, it takes next to nothing to wake me up. And then I'm fucking awake. So it compounds that problem. It's super fucking fun, which is why I'm able to ramble on like this, I think. And, it's fine because you guys don't know, but I could be dead asleep right now. I'd still be able to probably do this. you know, and you never know. You never know. If you were in the room with me, you'd never know because my eyes would be open. So honestly, I probably wouldn't be talking with my hands so much. I know you guys can't see it, but I do talk with my hands while I'm on here. And I don't know why I do. It's a weird habit. Nobody can see my fucking hands. There's no reason for me to do it. I don't even do that much when I'm actually having a face-to-face conversation. But for some reason, when I'm online here, I start gesticulating wildly as if to provide emphasis that only I can see. It's the strangest thing. But yeah, I don't think that I would do that so much in my sleep. But talking out of my ass, yeah, no problem. I can do that all day. Awake or asleep. Yeah. I mean, kinda. Yeah. So, it is what it is, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so to recap, I guess, I just kind of wanted to make sure that we got one of these in because we've been doing them on a monthly basis and I kind of fucked up last month or last week, thinking that I had another week to do this, which I didn't because obviously the end of February was after Saturday. But so I thought I had a little bit more time than I actually did, and I should have done this last week. So this is the February one. The March one will in fact be on the other end of March, provided I don't fuck up my days again. Essentially, but I wanted to make sure that we got this in because I don't want to skip the month and all that. And I like chatting with you guys sometimes. It's just me, you know. No snark, no. That's not true at all. There's plenty of snark. There's always snark, but it's nice. It's nice for me. Some of you guys have stated that y'all enjoy it. You keep showing up, so I'm assuming there's some truth to that, and all that. She says that she's cured that particular affliction. I don't know that for a fact. I know that that's what she says. But yeah, I think that's a fucking weird thing to do in your sleep. I'd sooner walk into traffic than get out my goddamn credit card while I'm asleep.
You know, because like that's a really complex thing. Like it's not that difficult to fucking walk out a door when you're sleeping, right? But with the you have to actually have the card, remember the numbers, type them in, log into whatever the fuck you're on, like Amazon or eBay or whatever. Type all your information in. You have to do it fucking correctly in order for it to show up on your goddamn doorstep. And you have to do all of that while you're asleep. I don't know that I buy that. It seems a little excessive for somnambulism. But that's going to be it for tonight, folks. I'm going to probably sign off here. I haven't decided yet. There might be. I got a few hours to kill, so I might do something else here in a little bit. I might not. I haven't decided yet. We'll be back to game streaming for sure tomorrow, probably earlier than we have been because I ended up taking a day off. And the reason that I took Thursday off was because I am in the process of is a potential. I don't want to say for sure because I need to confirm this before it happens. But about 4 o'clock in the morning, the Full Aussie is doing its Stargate streams, and I have been invited, so I may be on the Full Aussie early morning talking Stargate. So, and I believe the episode that we're discussing is going to be oh fuck, now I can't remember the name of it. It's the Groundhog Day episode. The one where Teal'c and Jack basically relive the day over and over again until they just start fucking doing other shit instead of trying to fix the problem. But anyway, so that's a thing that may happen. They're going to be gone regardless. I might be there. I gotta get a hold of Grant and all that stuff. So go check them out anyway. It's a good time. Abe will be there. Mr. Grant Gregory, Mud Crab, handful of other people that I don't recall off the top of my head and all that. But meantime, we're gonna dip out now. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great night, everybody. Appreciate all of you, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Bye.